right, family. Here it is, episode 3, Undercovered Opps, season 5. I'm Cody Carpentier. As always, please click that like button. Please smash that subscribe button and turn those notifications on here in the South Harmon Fantasy Football channel. This is it. We're here. 15 players to buy, to start, to stash, to hold. We'll have a drop. It's this is Undercovered Opps. This is what we do. We talk through all these different range of outcomes in all these different formats, dynasty, seasonal, you name it. We're here to talk about it. A lot of players' names I want to talk through today. I don't want to keep it too long. It's a beautiful, beautiful Friday. I haven't went to Costco yet. It's only 10:30 in the morning. Costco just opened. I got to get there, man. I got to get there and get my meat for the weekend. So here we are. Actually, I don't really need to get my meat for the weekend. I need to go get some croissants. And yeah, because I'm going to a barbecue festival on Saturday. So I really don't need to go get any more steak, but I will probably anyways because your boy loves some ribeye. So anyway, click that like button for me. Appreciate y'all tapping in on this beautiful Friday, or if you watch us on Saturday, or if you watch it on Sunday. I appreciate you. All right, here we go. Let's jump into it. Undercovered Opps, 15 players to talk about. We got to make this thing not last an hour and 45 minutes, which I have a good feeling it could. Number 1, hold. Who are we holding? We're holding Jalen Coker. I trust Coker more than I trust Xavier Legette. I love Legette. I watched Legette at a number of live events, including his pro day this past year. Great athlete, very tight-wounded athlete. And when I say that, think of DK Metcalf, think of David Boston, think of these jacked dudes where they have long muscle, but it's tight muscle. And it's not something that, think about a quarterback that maybe is jacked in the upper body. That's not good for a quarterback's throwing motion. Think about a receiver that is very tightly wound and gets hurt quite a bit. That's what Legette has been through college, and it's starting to continue in the NFL with hamstrings and ankles and hips and stuff. And Coker, I believe them trading away Jonathan Mingo tells us that they believe in Jalen Coker. Coker's a guy that they actually literally cut. He's from Holy Cross, undrafted, et cetera, et cetera. They cut him. He brought him back. Nobody, obviously, in the NFL outside of Carolina believed in him at all. They trade Mingo to the Dallas Cowboys, get a 4th-round pick for him, and a couple pick flop or whatever. The pick with Mingo plus for a 4th. Coker's going to be the guy that I think gets opportunity the rest of this season and likely into next season, because you can see what Carolina's doing, right? They brought in Deontay Johnson to try this thing out. Didn't work, so now they departed him to Baltimore. Jonathan Mingo, they spent the 2nd-round pick on 2 years ago, 39th overall. Obviously, Fitterer was the GM when that happened. Dan Morgan was in the building. They move on from him. They bring in Xavier Legette. They want Legette to be the alpha in this offense. I'm sure they're going to try it again next year, obviously. Why wouldn't you? He's a freak athlete. This team's not great. If they can get another quarterback in there, I think that's probably going to be their plan of attack. We got this 1st-round wide receiver in Xavier Legette. We got this undrafted guy in Jalen Coker who's learned from Adam Thielen all year, and Deontay Johnson. Thielen will be gone. It'll be Coker. It'll be Legette. And whatever quarterback they bring in, something along the lines of, Cam Ward or Carson Beck. I don't think Shedeur. I don't think Deion's going to let Shedeur go there. Whatever it may be. Shit, it may be Quinn. I don't know. But the point is, I feel good about what I've seen from Coker in an Adam Thielen type role, I believe the Jermaine Kearse one was thrown out there by Dave Canales this last week. This is his role. I believe in Jalen Coker more than anything. So I'm holding him in Dynasty. In season long, I'm indifferent. I'm probably holding him if I have him on my roster, just because I think that there is opportunities to plug him in these next few weeks with his connection with Bryce. I know people are annoyed because last week was kind of the week of we do this sometimes in fantasy football where there's like a week and it's like, this is the week, this guy's going to do it, and he doesn't do it. And then it's just kind of like we move on. But you got to realize the guy's had 9 targets the last 2 games in a not great offense. Like, he's going to continue to get targeted. Jatavian Sanders, who I want to talk about next, not next, but like in a couple of minutes, was also in that offense. And I don't think Jatavian Sanders is going to command all the targets every single week. But there's not a lot of targets to go around. So I'm holding Jalen Coker. I like him in Dynasty. I actually love him in Dynasty. And season long, I think there will be a couple of opportunities to play him. Dropping in seasonal and holding in Dynasty, of course, Of course, I'm holding him in Dynasty. I'm not getting rid of this guy in Dynasty. Sean Tucker has regressed back to the bottom of the pile. He had the big week earlier this year in an opportunity that was peachy for a starting running back in Tampa, as it always has been. Now they have 3 guys. It makes it a lot tougher. They clearly prefer Bucky and Rashad White miles ahead of Sean Tucker. Tucker's getting like a couple of opportunities a game right now, which is wild to see him have an RB1 overall game and then regress right back down to nothing. So I do think there's opportunity there at some point during the season if injuries happen again, but you can't even roster. You can't roster him anymore. And the reason I put him on here, maybe you already thought of this, but I've had to cut him in a couple of spots to create opportunity with these bye weeks. Now with 4 bye weeks upcoming, there's multiple more buys to make room on my roster to play guys. So Sean Tucker, hold, of course, in Dynasty. I'm even buying him in Dynasty based on what I've seen so far. And I think he's going to be a fine play. Maybe not buying him right now, but just keeping your eye on that for an opportunity to come up. If there is a move that's made with other players that you can kind of lump him in to that same conversation. All right, next. We're going to move on past the holds to the watch party here. Players that we want to watch over the course of the next couple of weeks. Jaquan Jackson, wide receiver, 5'11", 185 pounds, out of Tulane. He was a Senior Bowler this past year, played with Michael Pratt down there at Tulane. Jaquan Jackson's a nice wide receiver. He's in Tennessee right now. Tennessee, of course, just lost DeAndre Hopkins. Treylon Burks is bona fide done, toast. Kelvin Ridley is there. They're moving around quarterbacks on a weekly basis, and Nick Westbrook-Akine has been getting that work. We'll talk about Nick Westbrook-Akine here in a couple of minutes. Jaquan Jackson, though, finally got on the field the last month for the first time this year. 0% of routes in week 6, 2% of routes in week 7, 5% of routes in week 8, and 21% of routes in week 9. This is the thing we look for under Undercovered Opps, these trend lines that are pointing to more and more opportunity for players that we like. We like Jaquan Jackson. So we're going to keep on watching Jaquan Jackson, and we're going to see if that role turns in from 21% to 30%, 35%. When it starts to get up into that, 45, 50, and he maybe catches, maybe gets 3-4 targets, that's when you can feel some type of way about potentially utilizing him in some facet, especially if this team's going to be as bad as it's going to continue to be. In Dynasty, I think Jaquan Jackson's a guy that should already be stashed on your rosters. Another guy I'm watching is Ramel Keaton from Tennessee, wide receiver, Tennessee Volunteers, that is, plays for the Las Vegas Raiders now. 6 foot, 290 pounds. He was a 4.47 40 guy, undrafted this past year. There was like 3 wide receivers, him included, DJ Turner included, and one other in Las Vegas that were UDFAs that made the roster on day 1. And now in week 9, we see Keaton jump onto the field, a 54% route share. DJ Turner went from 98% to 67% to 33% the last 3 weeks. And Keaton has went the opposite direction. He's the one that's rising. 3 wide receiver sets with Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker, and Ramel Keaton. Kind of the rest of season seems the most logical as they figure out what he is and what kind of a role they can expect, or maybe they can expect anything from him. My belief level in Keaton doing anything is like a 2.5 on the Undercovered Opps scale. That's just what he is. I think there's opportunity here, but again, what do you know about Las Vegas? The quarterback play is incompetent. The offensive play is incompetent, and they're not going to run a ton of 3 wide receiver sets because of Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer. Ramel Keaton, though, is a watch right now for Dynasty. He could become a stash, but he's a watch right now. Guys I do want to stash, and guys we've talked about before. So stash is maybe a middling term for both of these guys, but I'm going to name them anyway. Parker Washington, I've talked about him for the last 2 years, coming out of Penn State. He's a 5'11", 195-pound guy. This is the archetype. If you've ever heard me talk about the archetype, it's these receivers. Everybody knows the top-end guys, the Odells, the Chases, and things of that nature, but there's guys every year that come out. They're this build, this archetype. Athletes that are 5'11", 195 pounds, 6 foot, 190 pounds, 6 foot, 205 pounds, DJ Moores, Malik Neighbors, every year. This is my favorite archetype. This is the new age archetype. We're no longer the Brandon Marshalls, the Kelvin Johnsons, the Julio Joneses. This is the archetype of the guys you want. This next class, Luther Burden, et cetera, et cetera. Parker Washington fits that. I talked about it for the last 2 years. Washington was very good at Penn State and a top-end athlete who dealt with a foot injury during his pre-draft process, very similar to Kendre Miller. Here's a perfect role in Jacksonville to sit behind Christian Kirk all of last year, and then sit behind Christian Kirk this year. And I talked about him this fall when I was in the Roster Watch training camp tour in Jacksonville, in Duval, at the Jacksonville and Tampa Bay training camp. Kirk was not practicing, and Parker Washington was the starting slot receiver. Looked good doing it. Looked very good doing it. And my thoughts since that date were they're going to try and move off of Kirk. They need to get rid of Kirk. Parker Washington can play this role. It just the natural progression. After they paid Christian Kirk a few years ago, it always seemed wrong from day one when they paid him. They wanted to make a splash, and then they went out and paid Gabe Davis this year, and they drafted Brian Thomas, and they had Parker Washington sitting there, and I was just like, this doesn't make sense. And then, of course, Christian Kirk, they were going to trade to Pittsburgh or try to, and he hasn't done anything all year, and he has a collarbone injury, and his plans kind of go haywire. But he did get hurt, so now Parker Washington's starting. I quietly had 6 targets last week. Obviously, there's news that Trevor Lawrence is probably not going to play this weekend. Mac Jones will be that guy. Remember, for the majority of the first part of the year, Mac is working with the second team. Parker's not on the starting team. I have to assume there's going to be a little bit of a connection there with Mac and Parker, maybe a little better than it would be for Mac and Ingram or Mac and Brian Thomas. So I'm going to continue to stash Parker Washington, continue to add him, continue to buy him, places that I can, where people that don't listen to me aren't playing against me, because every time I come on this Undercovered Opps show, now I get off and I have people offering for me to overpay for certain players. Last week there was no show, but I tweeted out my only thought, which was people need to realize what Cedric Tillman is. We'll talk about Ced Tillman here in a minute. I'll talk about him just for the reason of it. But I had an offer, I think, from our guy Mahoney, and he was like, I gave up. I did it. I don't care. I did it. I gave up Aaron Jones to get Cedric Tillman, and I'll tell you guys why here in a minute. But this is the point: is that I'll overpay, sure, because I'm me. But I do think Parker Washington's well worth your stash in Dynasty in a play this week in seasonal. The other stashes I talked about a minute ago: Kendre Miller. This Dennis Allen thing was fucked, man. Dennis Allen must have just hated Kendre for whatever reason. The guy was banged up when Kendre got there. He had a knee injury, of course, missed the pre-draft process, and he was banged up for the majority of the preseason. And Dennis Allen famously said, "You can't make the team on the med table." He put him on IR last week before he was fired because he figured he would be out a while. That's what came out. The news was that he wasn't actually hurt bad enough to go on IR, but Dennis Allen was annoyed with Kendre, so he just put him on IR. Just a pure lack of support for Kendre Miller, which is kind of fucking sad from a Dennis Allen perspective. The guy got fucking fired, as he should have, this past week. So I'm still stashing Kendre. That's some bullshit. And I know Kendre is good. He averaged 6 yards per carry just a few weeks ago on this New Orleans putrid offensive line. Shout out Kyle Hergel. And he had some targets out of the backfield. I know they just paid Kamara a couple weeks ago, but I do like what I've seen from Kendre when he is healthy. Appreciate y'all jumping in the chat already. See if we got any thoughts coming in. Florosaurus says Sean Tucker must be so mad after being hyped up. Man, the guy got hyped up, and he also had the best week of the best performance of the week in a singular week. I'd be pissed as well. Frenzy Fantasy says 10-man PPR trade, Jaden Reed, B-Rob, and Mooney for Kupp and Ramondre. Other wide receivers are Jamar, St. Brown, McLaurin. Running backs are Derrick Henry, James Conner, Chase Brown. I definitely like the Reed Mooney side of this. You have 3 receivers. You got a running back. I prefer B-Rob to Ramondre. I think I prefer the Reed Mooney side. I know I love Kupp, but I'm a little indifferent on that whole thing. And Mooney's been on a tear, and Reed's been on a tear. Bruce, we will get to the Saints here in just a minute. It's not a stash. It's better than that. This week, at least, I believe. All right, one player I want to add is Jatavian Sanders. I know in Dynasty he will have already been rostered by a majority of people because, for obvious reasons, he was a mid-round draft pick for the University of Texas, once thought of as an early round projected draft pick. If you need help right now at tight end, Jatavian Sanders can be that guy. He's a low-key play rest of season with the lack of targets in Carolina. We talked about Coker a minute ago, gets banged up. And Bryce Young showing connection with our guy Jatavian Sanders. So Jatavian, I think, is a play rest of season down there in Carolina. The one thing that Jatavian's good at is creating yak, and he's athletic enough to make plays with the ball in his hand. 3 of the last 4 weeks, he's been a top 15 tight end, 9 fantasy points, 12, 12.7. And then the 1 week in week 8, he has, he had 1 point. But I believe they're going to continue to work towards getting Jatavian the ball on a weekly basis, which at tight end, that's what we need. We want that. I mean, if you can average 10 points a game at tight end, I mean, we can play with that. We can utilize that on a weekly basis. So Jatavian Sanders is an add and a play in seasonal leagues. Buy. This is an interesting one. Bo Nix. I'm buying Bo Nix's Dynasty stock. I think it's going to explode heading into 2025. It feels like a known right now for an obvious thing, but it feels like a known or like an obvious take, but I haven't really heard anyone with this sentiment. Nix is quarterback 7 right now since week 2 with a win-loss record of 5-2 with the Broncos. I know the competition really hasn't been the toughest, but his weaponry's bottom 5 in the NFL right now. I love Javonte Williams, but Javonte has not been great the last month. Cortland Sutton, Devon Vele, Adam Troutman, Troy Franklin, Marvin Mims, Greg Dulcich. Like, what have we really gotten from all of these guys? Cortland Sutton's been boom bust, 100 yards, 0 yards, 100 yards, whatever. I really think that this dynasty stock for Bo Nix is about to blow up, and not blow up like this week or like in a month. More so like when you head into the 2025 season, I think you're going to be looking at Bo Nix as, so where do I have him right now? And where do I think he's going to belong? So let me pull up my rankings quick, and I'll show you exactly where I have him. Bo Nix, I currently have, and I talked about this a couple weeks ago about him being top 12. I currently have him. Okay, I sorted that wrong. I got to sort this again. Great radio for me to just search this while I'm on here. 32nd overall in Superflex. And my quarterback, 13. I do think in a realistic world, you could be looking at Bo Nix right next to Jordan Love, ahead of Joe Burrow, depending on what happens with T. Higgins. I think Bo Nix is going to get a weapon this offseason, whether it's free agency and or the draft. And with Sean Payton, with an improved offensive line, with an improved offense, I'm not saying this Kansas City thing is going to come to an end by any means next year, but it has to start to regress a little bit, depending on what Andy Reid does. If they win that Super Bowl, I wouldn't be surprised if Andy Reid walks with a 3rd consecutive title. And I think that we could see just a shift in the AFC West. And I think that could be led by Bo Nix and Denver. So I do think the dynasty stock with Bo Nix is still in a spot that's attainable. And I do think he's going to get to a spot where it's not really that attainable to buy a Bo Nix in dynasty. And I just want to kind of bring that up as a thought, because I think he does get a real piece in free agency and or the draft and improve that weaponry. And at that point, people will start putting 2 and 2 together. And like I said, he's been QB 7 since week 2. He's been QB 5 since week 5. He's been pretty elite in fantasy football terms. He's been running the football a lot. And I'm definitely coming more and more and more around the corner on Bo Nix. I liked him while he was at Oregon. I didn't think that he was going to be a dominant fantasy football or NFL quarterback. I thought he'd be competent, but he's doing very well. So Bo Nix there as a buy in Dynasty before it gets too late. The other one is Cedric Tillman. I brought up last week in the tweet. This guy is Nico Collins reincarnate. Nico Collins, 6'3", 215 pounds, runs a 4.50, coming out of Michigan, a Big Ten school. Shown it in college, and then was a 3rd-round pick, went to Houston, played with Davis Mills, and then finally got an opportunity and is flourishing in a Marvin Harrison type role under C.J. Stroud. Stroud's college teammate Marvin Harrison is what I'm alluding to there. Cedric Tillman, on the other hand, Tennessee, 6'3", 215, 4.54. Did it at Tennessee. Was actually thought of as the better wide receiver at Tennessee when he was there with Jalen Hyatt. And everyone remembers Jalen Hyatt's Biletnikoff Award. No, miss me with the whole Jalen Hyatt thing. Flash in the pan. Cedric Tillman did it. Not only with Hendon Hooker, but he's starting to do it now with Jameis. Deshaun Watson hadn't thrown for 300 yards in his entire career with Cleveland. Jameis did it in his first game. Jameis unlocked this guy. This guy looked better than anything we've seen from Amari Cooper in his time in Cleveland. And I love it. They're entering a bye right now. He is the wide receiver 1 in fantasy the last 3 weeks. Over the last 3 weeks, wide receiver 13, 3, and 12. His target shares are 23%, 23%, 18%. If that target share goes up for the rest of the season or stays north of 20, they're not playing Deshaun Watson, I don't think, next year. Obviously, towards Achilles. He's not going to be ready. And he's just not going to be ready by week 1. Will they roll with Jameis week 1 next year, or will they draft a quarterback to enter next year? Or just sign a quarterback like Jameis or somebody else that can come in and get the football to a wide receiver. I think Tillman's in a great spot to be the number 1 entering next year, and he's in a Nico-like situation that if you do get a competent quarterback to come in there, he can be that guy like Nico is right now. So I'm buying all the Cedric Tillman I can, including trading Mahoney, Aaron Jones for said Tillman, because that team specifically I'm rebuilding. Next buy is Najee Harris. You're trying to win a championship this year? Go get Najee Harris. Since Russ has entered the lineup, he's averaging 15 fantasy points per game. He looks different. The offense looks different. Pittsburgh looks good. I'm in. Najee Harris is a buy if you're trying to win a championship in 2024 in any format. I think we have a buy window opening on Braylon Allen. We saw what he could do, what he will do, and what he would do with opportunity. And they've suppressed his workload. And now they're starting to come back to it a little bit more. I think you have to take advantage of the windows that are there for you. And if you can potentially get a Braylon Allen heading into 2025, if your team's not great, I would love to do that. The next one, you asked about New Orleans in the chat just a couple of minutes ago. New Orleans is a fucking mess, period. First and foremost, New Orleans is a mess with injuries, with losing, with what else? Anything you want. They're a mess. Rashid Shaheed, Chris Olave, opportunities are at hand. Cedric Wilson is one I talked about on the show with Maddie yesterday, the walkthrough. You can listen to that on the South Harmon podcast channel. Cedric Wilson was a wide receiver 8 just a couple weeks ago. Why wouldn't Cedric Wilson get the opportunities to do that again this week? And because Cedric Wilson's hurt, that's why. Because Cedric Wilson logged I think he did not practice on Wednesday was the note that I got, or maybe it was Thursday. Let me pull up the practice report right now. Ced Wilson, come on, baby, load. Ced Wilson was DNP Wednesday and Thursday. Of course, Chris Olave was DNP. But the one that I am leaning towards here in New Orleans is Mason Tipton. Mason Tipton is the burner out of Yale that we've seen get opportunities. He had 9 targets back in week 7, 4 in week 5. The last 2 weeks, he's only had 5 targets combined. Bub Means did not play last week. I think Tipton's a guy with 4.33 speed, 5'9", 180 pounds. Why wouldn't you at least, shoot the moon a couple times if you're Derek Carr, if you're New Orleans? They got a new coach coming, not a new coach, but, the regime change thing. Again, I rephrase that again. Not regime change, but it's like the Bisaccia rule, the Pierce rule. When you get a new coach, you get a different boost of energy. Alex has a good name for it. Alex Dunlap over at Roster Watch is a good name for the new coach coming in. But you get the point. I do think that there's going to be a little bit of a jolt of energy into that New Orleans locker room. I'm not saying they're going to win this weekend, but I think opportunity could be there for Mason Tipton as kind of the de facto burner in New Orleans. 5'9", 179, 4.33, undrafted rookie out of Yale down there in New Orleans. I might play him. I might play him in some GPPs this week. So with 4 buys, I don't think it's out of question to play him in fantasy. Another one I want to play and I feel a little bit better about is Nick Westbrook-Ikhine in Tennessee. He isn't great. I get that. But he's averaging 9.5 fantasy points per game the last 3 weeks, and Hopkins is gone and Burks is a 0. I think Nick Westbrook-Ikhine is definitely flexible in this Tennessee offense. So there's Nick Westbrook-Akine again. This is a guy that it always smells. You always got to plug your nose when you want to play Nick Westbrook-Akine on a weekly basis, but it gets the job done sometimes. And I do believe Nick Westbrook-Akine is one that you can trust. A couple of questions from the chat I'll jump up on here before we get out here. Would you trade Ted DeSante says, would you trade Ferguson for Tillman? I think Ferguson may have the best connection outside of Rico Dowdle with Cooper Rush in Dallas. Depending on my roster, if you're loaded at tight end, I would, and you need wide receiver help, I definitely would be in line to make that move for Tillman. I love Tillman over Jake Ferguson as the lines continue to go. Florosaurus listening to Cody spitting some buys. Haha. Nice work there, Florosaurus. Already talking about the Cedric Wilson injury. Yo, would you send Brian Thomas Jr. for Debo? Also have CMC. I think they may shut down Trevor. Trevor is, like on the brink of being shut down, especially when they get waxed this weekend by the Vikings. Doug Peterson just said 19 minutes ago on Trevor, it is trending in a way that is leaning toward not playing, which is something we already knew from yesterday. Wesley, sorry, to answer that question, Mad Max, I would prefer, I don't really want to have Debo and CMC on my rosters, but I get it. You can do it. I still think BTJ is going to get his targets, though, with Mac. Wesley says, what are you doing with AR in Dynasty? You're holding him. You cannot afford to get rid of him or sell him at this point because right now it's nuked. But he will get opportunity. It may be in 6 weeks. It may be next year, but he will get opportunity. He's a mad athlete. He's a great dude, a great learner. But he's just in a weird situation. You don't learn as much as the starter with a Joe Flacco in the room as you do as a backup with Joe Flacco in the room. You learn a ton more as the backup. That's just a known thing across the NFL. So I think he'll be just fine in the long run. What to do with Tracy on rebuilding team? Sell high. Draft capital scares me. Reminds me of Pierce. He is not Pierce. He's way better. Again, he's only been playing the running back position for 2 years. Tracy's closer to Rashad White than he is Damian Pierce. And when people say, well, I don't want Rashad White because Rashad White's got Buck Irvin. Rashad White's a good running back. That situation, I don't know why the running game isn't succeeding as much in Tampa this year because their offensive line's pretty good. But I do believe Tracy makes it through the hay. I would say, think about Chuba. Chuba is a guy that was drafted in the 3rd or 4th round and grinded his ass off and got opportunity. Pierce, same thing, grinded his ass off, got opportunity. Rashad White, same thing. I think Pierce, the reason he got short-sticked really was the scheme. Pierce is not built for the Bobby Slowick scheme. Pierce will have another opportunity. You want to talk about the real undercovered op? Pierce is a true undercovered op at this current stage of his career. When he does get to go to a new team with more of a gap run scheme, I think you're going to see Pierce flourish with some opportunities. We do have some news here. Sean McDermott has ruled out wide receiver Keon Coleman this weekend for the Buffalo Bills. Of course, they're playing the Indianapolis Colts. What is our update on Amari Cooper? Do we have an update on Amari Cooper? Cooper was limited both days, so it looks like Cooper is probably going to play. They both have wrist injuries. I wonder if that's because old buddy Allen throws the ball too damn hard. Yeah, JK. Curtis Samuel also limited in Buffalo at the wide receiver position. Interesting. Maybe we'll finally get some, a real sick Dalton Kincaid week. Wouldn't that be something to finally just get a real sick Dalton Kincaid week? Nope. It'd probably be Shakir. All right, last one. Ted Santi, appreciate the question. I would not get rid of Tracy. I would not get rid of Tracy. All right, last thing here. Dirtbike asking about Parker Washington. Yes, I would play Parker Washington this weekend. Last thing. I just want to plead to the New England Patriots to continue to throw the football to Kayshon Boutte. And I want to plead to Kayshon Boutte to please catch the football. We need more receptions. We need more receptions, not just targets. We need more receptions, not just targets. Boutte has 6 targets each of the last 2 games. We need more receptions, Kayshon. And Drake May, we just need you to deliver the ball just a little bit better. Please, I'm pleading you. I want Keishawn Butte to be a thing so badly in Dynasty and seasonal and everything, every walk of the sport. Undercovered Opps, Season 5, Episode 3 in the books. South Harmon, click that like button, click subscribe. We appreciate you. We love you. And I know Maddie's going to be back on Sunday morning with the game plan. So stay tuned in and stay tapped the fuck in. Everything South Harmon, southharmonff.com, patreon.com/South Harmon. Appreciate you, boys. Support your boys because we appreciate you.